Nobody tells you that increase has a warning. They make it sound like it just falls out of the sky one day, like one morning you wake up and everything is suddenly different. But that's not how God works, and I think part of you already knows that. Before the increase ever shows up in your hands, it shows up in signs. And right now, if you're honest, you've been seeing things you can't quite explain. Strange shifts, things ending, things stirring, a feeling you can't put into words, and you keep wondering if it means something, or if you're just imagining it. Let me settle that for you tonight. You're not imagining it. And here's what most people miss. Before God releases increase into a person's life, He almost never does it silently. He prepares the soil first. He sends signs. He rearranges things. He starts moving pieces on the board long before you ever see the picture come together. The problem is, most people sleep right through it. They're so busy worrying about the lack in front of them that they completely miss the provision being assembled behind the scenes. My name is George, and for years now, I've sat with people in the hardest seasons of their lives, people at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at bills they can't pay, wondering if God forgot their address. And I've watched something happen to nearly every single one of them. Right before the breakthrough came, there were signs, always, 9 of them, over and over, showing up in different lives, in different ways, but always pointing to the same thing: increase is coming. So tonight I'm going to walk you through these 9 signs. And I want you to be honest with yourself as we go, because some of you watching right now are standing in the middle of 3 or 4 of these at this very moment, and you've been calling it a curse, when heaven has been calling it preparation. Now I know what some of you are thinking. George, if God is for me, why does it feel so hard right now? I understand that question. I've asked it myself, late at night, with my own back against the wall. But I want you to consider something. A farmer doesn't scatter seed on top of hard, packed ground. First he breaks it up. He plows. He turns the soil over and over until the earth that was hard becomes soft enough to receive. And to anyone watching from the road, it would look like he's tearing up a perfectly good field. They'd think he was destroying it, but the farmer knows the truth: there is no harvest without the breaking first. What looks like destruction to the world is preparation in the eyes of the one who planted it. That's what I want you to hold on to tonight. Some of you have been watching God plow your life, and you've been crying over the broken ground, when you should have been getting ready for the harvest. So let's start with the first one, and as I describe it, ask yourself honestly, have I been seeing this and calling it the wrong thing? The first sign is the strangest one, and it's the one people complain about the most. Everything starts falling apart right before it comes together. Think about that for a second. You've been praying for change, asking God to move, and suddenly it feels like your whole life is being shaken loose. The job feels unstable. Relationships you thought were solid start showing cracks. Things you depended on stop working. And your first instinct is panic. You think, Lord, I asked for a blessing and you sent me a storm. But here's what I've learned. God doesn't pour new wine into old wineskins. Before He fills you, He has to empty you of the things that can't hold what He's about to give. Look at Joseph. Before the palace there was a pit. Before the signet ring of Pharaoh there was the cold iron of a prison cell. Everything in Joseph's life looked like collapse, betrayed by his brothers, sold like cattle, falsely accused, forgotten in a dungeon. If you had watched his life unfold, you would have sworn God had abandoned him. But every single one of those losses was a hallway. Every door that slammed shut was pushing him toward the one door that would open into more than he ever imagined. The shaking wasn't punishment. It was positioning. So if your life feels like it's coming apart at the seams, don't you dare assume the worst. Sometimes the things falling away are simply the things you were never meant to carry into the next season. The second sign is just as confusing, and it happens quietly. People start pulling away from you. Friends who used to call go silent. Some relationships just fade. Others end with a sting you didn't see coming. And it hurts, because you didn't do anything wrong. You start to wonder if something is wrong with you. But listen to me. Not every goodbye is a rejection. Some of them are a release. There are people who can walk with you in the valley, but cannot follow you up the mountain. There are people assigned to a chapter, not to the whole book. When God is preparing to elevate you, He often begins by clearing the room, because the conversations that fed your smallness cannot survive in the atmosphere of your calling. Remember Abraham. Before God could make him the father of nations, He told him to leave. Leave your country. Leave your father's house. Leave the familiar. Everything Abraham knew, everyone who shaped his ordinary life, had to be left behind so that he could become someone new. Increase almost always requires separation first. So when the room gets quieter than you expected, don't grieve every empty chair. Sometimes God is simply making space for the people He's about to bring. The third sign catches people completely off guard, because it doesn't feel spiritual at all. It feels like exhaustion. A deep, bone-level tiredness with the way things are. You wake up and the things that used to satisfy you feel hollow. The routine that once felt safe now feels like a cage. You're not depressed exactly, you're restless. Something in you is straining against the walls of your current life. That holy discontent is one of the surest signs that increase is near. God plants dissatisfaction in your spirit when He's about to move you. Think about the eagle. There comes a point when the mother eagle begins to stir the nest, pulling out the soft feathers, exposing the sharp twigs underneath. Why would she make her own children uncomfortable? Because they were built to fly, and they'll never leave a comfortable nest. The discomfort isn't cruelty, it's an invitation. So when you feel that ache, that sense that you were made for more than this, don't medicate it. Don't scroll past it. That restlessness might be the very wind that's about to lift you. I think about Moses when I talk about this. For 40 years he lived as a prince in Egypt, with everything a man could want: wealth, comfort, status, security. And yet something in him never settled. There was an ache he couldn't name, a sense that he didn't belong to the palace even while he lived in it. That holy discontent eventually drove him out into the wilderness, where he spent another 40 years tending sheep on the backside of a desert. To anyone else, his life looked like a downgrade, from a palace to a pasture. But God was using that restlessness, that long season of not fitting in anywhere, to empty Moses of Egypt and fill him with something else. And then one ordinary day, while he was doing the same thing he'd done 1,000 times before, he saw a bush on fire that would not burn up. That was the moment everything turned. 80 years of restlessness, of feeling out of place, of wandering, and it all led to a burning bush and a calling that would set a nation free. So if you feel like you don't fit anymore, like the life around you has gotten too small for the thing inside you, take heart. Sometimes the restlessness is just God refusing to let you get comfortable in a place you were never meant to stay. The fourth sign is one that almost no one talks about, and it's deeply personal. You start having dreams again. Not the dreams you have at night, though sometimes those come too. I mean, the dreams you buried. The ones you stopped letting yourself want. Suddenly, an old desire resurfaces. A picture of a life you gave up on years ago flickers back to life in your imagination, and part of you wants to dismiss it, because hoping hurts when you've been disappointed before. But here's what I want you to understand. God doesn't resurrect a dream just to taunt you with it. When He brings something back, it's because the season has finally arrived for it. Sarah laughed when she heard she would have a child, because she had long since given up on it. Her body said it was over. Her age said it was impossible. But the dream she had buried was the very thing God intended to fulfill. So if you feel an old hope stirring back to life, pay attention. Heaven doesn't waste resurrections. Now, before I go on to the fifth sign, I need to pause here, because I can feel that some of you watching are right in the middle of this. You're feeling the shaking, the separation, the restlessness, the dreams coming back, and you don't have words for what's happening to you. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived, things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. Now let's keep going, because the next signs are where it gets real. The fifth sign is unexpected favor from unexpected places. A door opens that you didn't knock on. Someone helps you who had no reason to. A conversation falls into your lap. A stranger says something that lands like a word from God Himself. You can't take credit for it, and you can't explain it. It just shows up. This is one of the clearest fingerprints of God. When He's about to increase you, He starts sending favor ahead of you like a scout. Look at Ruth, a widow, a foreigner, gleaning leftover grain in a field just to survive. She had no status, no connections, no leverage. And yet she happened to wander into the field of a man named Boaz, a man who would not only protect her but redeem her entire future. The Bible calls it chance, but we know better. That was favor, running ahead of her. So when good things start happening that you didn't earn and can't explain, don't shrug them off as luck. That's not luck. That's the hand of God, clearing the path before your feet ever reach it. And let me tell you something else about favor, because I don't want you to think it only shows up as a kind stranger or an open door. Sometimes favor shows up looking like the very thing that once oppressed you, suddenly handing you everything. Think about the children of Israel. For 400 years they were slaves in Egypt, beaten, broken, building someone else's empire with their bare hands. And when the day of their deliverance finally came, the Bible tells us something almost unbelievable. As they walked out of that land, the very Egyptians who had enslaved them pressed gold and silver and fine clothing into their hands. The people who had stolen their freedom ended up funding their future. They walked out of bondage carrying the wealth of the nation that had held them down. That's what favor can do. God doesn't just open the prison door sometimes. He makes the prison pay for your fresh start. So if you've been held back by something for years, don't be surprised if God turns the very source of your struggle into the soil of your supply. He has done it before. He is more than able to do it again. The sixth sign is internal, and it's powerful. You stop being afraid of things that used to terrify you. A boldness rises in you that wasn't there before. Decisions that would have paralyzed you a year ago, you make without flinching. Risks you would have avoided suddenly feel like the obvious next step. And it confuses the people around you, because they remember the smaller, more fearful version of you. That new courage is not your personality changing. It's your spirit being equipped for what's coming. God will never give you a vision bigger then your fear, and then leave the fear in place. He upgrades your inner man before he upgrades your circumstances. Think of Gideon, hiding in a winepress, threshing wheat in secret, because he was terrified of his enemies. And the angel walks up and calls him a mighty man of valor, when he was acting like anything but. God saw what Gideon would become before Gideon could see it himself. So if you've noticed a strange new boldness rising in you, don't question it. That's not arrogance. That's God installing the courage you'll need to carry what He's about to hand you. And I want to stay here for just one more moment, because there's a young man in Scripture who shows us exactly how this works. David. Before he ever wore a crown, before he ever led an army, he was the youngest of his brothers, the one left in the fields with the sheep, while everyone else got called to the table. The forgotten one, the afterthought. And one day he walks up to the battle line, carrying bread for his older brothers, and he sees a giant that has every trained soldier in Israel frozen with fear. Grown men with armor and swords and years of experience, shaking in their boots. And here comes this shepherd boy who looks at the same giant they're all afraid of and feels something rise up in him that none of them feel. Not fear. Boldness. A holy confidence that says, "Who is this man to defy the living God?" Now where did that come from? David wasn't bigger than those soldiers. He wasn't stronger. He had no training. But out in those lonely fields, when no one was watching, God had been preparing him. A lion came, and God gave him the courage to face it. A bear came, and God gave him the strength to overcome it. By the time the giant showed up, David had already been equipped in secret for a victory he would win in public. That's how God works. He builds the courage in the quiet before He calls for it in the crowd. So if you feel a David rising in you, a boldness that doesn't match your Ursum, a confidence that confuses the people who knew the old you, don't talk yourself out of it. The giant in front of you might just be the doorway to the throne God has been preparing you for all along. The seventh sign is one of my favorites, because it's so easy to miss. You become generous in a season when, logically, you should be holding tighter. You feel a pull to give your time, your money, your encouragement, even when you don't feel like you have much to spare. And the world will tell you you're being foolish. Why would you give away what little you have? But here's the secret of the kingdom. Generosity is not what you do after the blessing comes. It's the very channel through which it flows. When God sees that you'll be faithful with a little, He knows He can trust you with much. The widow with 2 small coins gave everything she had, and Jesus pointed to her as the greatest giver in the temple, over the rich who gave from their overflow. Why? Because she opened her hands when it made no sense to. And open hands are the only kind that can receive. So if you've felt this strange, almost irrational desire to be generous right now, in the middle of your own need, that's not foolishness. That's your spirit recognizing that the pipeline is being prepared. There's a story that has stayed with me for years, and it lives right here in this 7th sign. There was a widow in a town called Zarephath, in the middle of a famine. She was down to her very last handful of flour and a little oil in a jar, just enough to make one final small meal for herself and her son. After that, she fully expected the 2 of them to lie down and die. That's how desperate it was. And in walks the prophet Elijah, a stranger, and he asks her of all things to make him a meal first, to give him her last before she fed herself or her own child. The 8th sign is the one that tests you the most, because it feels like silence. The closer you get to the breakthrough, the quieter heaven seems to become. You pray, and it feels like the words bounce off the ceiling. You used to feel God so clearly, and now there's this stillness. And the enemy whispers, "See? He stopped listening. You've been forgotten. But I want you to hear me on this. The silence right before the breakthrough is not absence. It is the deepest test of faith there is. Think about Lazarus. His sisters sent for Jesus, and Jesus, who loved them, deliberately waited. For days. Lazarus died. The silence must have been unbearable. Mary and Martha must have felt completely abandoned. But Jesus wasn't absent. He was waiting for the moment when the miracle would be undeniable. He didn't show up to heal a sick man. He showed up to raise a dead one. So if you're in a season where heaven feels quiet, don't mistake the silence for distance. Sometimes God goes quiet because he's about to do something so big that he doesn't want any explanation left except his own glory. And that brings us to the ninth sign, the final one, and the one that ties them all together. A deep, supernatural peace settles over you that does not match your circumstances at all. By every earthly measure, you should be anxious. The bank account says panic, the calendar says worry. The situation hasn't changed. And yet there's a calm in you that you can't manufacture. A quiet assurance that everything is going to be all right, even though nothing on the outside has shifted yet. That peace is the seal. When God is about to bring increase, he often gives you the peace before he gives you the proof. Because faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not yet see. Remember the disciples in the boat, in the middle of a storm so violent they were sure they'd drown. And where was Jesus? Asleep, at peace, because he knew the outcome before the wind ever picked up. That same peace he carried is the peace he gives to those he's about to elevate. So if you've felt an inexplicable calm in the middle of a storm that should be crushing you, that's not denial. That's not you ignoring reality. That's heaven's signature on your situation, telling you the increase is already on its way. Now let me bring this all together, because I don't want you to leave with just a list. I want you to leave with understanding. These 9 signs: the shaking, the separation, the restlessness, the resurrected dreams, the unexpected favor, the new boldness, the strange generosity, the silence, and the peace, they are not random. They're a pattern. And when you start seeing several of them at once in your life, it's not a coincidence, and it's certainly not a punishment. It's preparation. It's God doing the deep work in the dark before he brings the harvest into the light. But here's the part I really need you to hear. Signs are not the same as the destination. A sign points you somewhere, it doesn't carry you there. The favor, the peace, the courage, they're confirmations that you're on the right road. But you still have to keep walking. You still have to keep believing when the silence stretches long. You still have to keep giving when it makes no sense. You still have to keep your hands open when everything in you wants to clench your fists in fear. Because the people who miss their increase aren't usually the ones who never got the signs. They're the ones who got the signs and panicked anyway. They saw the shaking and ran. They felt the separation and begged the wrong people to stay. They felt the restlessness and numbed it. They sensed the silence and gave up one day too soon. The signs were all there, but fear talked louder than faith. Don't let that be your story. If God has been showing you these things, it's because he's trying to get your attention before the breakthrough, not after it. He wants you to walk into your increase with your eyes open, knowing it was him all along. He wants you to be able to look back and say, I saw it coming. I felt him preparing me, and I trusted him even when I couldn't see. And let me say one more thing to the person who feels like they've already missed it. Maybe you're listening to all of this, and a heaviness is settling on you because you think, George, I saw the signs years ago, and I ran. I panicked. I gave up. The window closed. I want you to hear me clearly. The God we serve is the God of the second chance. He is the God who met Peter on the shore after Peter had denied him 3 times, and instead of condemning him, he fed him breakfast and gave him back his calling. He is the God who restored to his people the years the locusts had eaten. Your delay is not your denial. The fact that you missed it once does not mean it's gone forever. Those same 9 signs can show up again in your life, in this season, because God's mercy doesn't keep a tally of how many chances you've used up. If you're feeling even a flicker of these signs tonight, that flicker is an invitation. Don't run from it this time. Stand still, stay open, and watch what he does. Because here's the truth I've seen play out again and again in real lives, around real kitchen tables, with real people who had every reason to quit. The breakthrough almost never arrives the way we imagined it. It rarely comes on our timeline. But it comes. For the ones who keep their eyes open, and their hands open, and their hearts soft, it comes. So I want you to do something for me right now, before you click away. I want you to go down to the comments and tell me one thing, and be specific. Of these 9 signs, which one are you living right now, this very week? Not in general. Not all of them. I want you to name the one that hit you the hardest while you were watching the shaking, the silence, the peace, the dreams coming back, and tell me, in one sentence, exactly how it's showing up in your life. Because when you put words to what God is doing, you stop being a spectator and you start being a participant. And I read these. I pray over them. Your sentence might be the very thing someone else scrolling through needs to see tonight. This channel is created without ads and without platform income. If these messages have touched your heart, strengthened your faith, or helped you during a difficult moment, and you'd like to support this work, you can use the CR code on your screen or the contribution link in the pinned comment. Thank you for walking this path with us.